Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Might get started. Just because I'm mindful that you're all on your lunch break probably, so I don't want to keep too much of your time. Might get this up. So thank you very much for joining me today. I think a few of you might have joined us in the past as well. We've been running this webinar series for a little while now. So we've touched on quite a few different subjects, but if you haven't joined us before and you're joining us for the first time, my name is Veronica. I'm from BACK2WORK. So I work specifically with clients in the employment service industry. So our mission is to support job seekers, employment service providers, and the broader community by providing the health link for people to realise the full potential, basically. So we'll be jumping into the topic of today in a second, but I just wanted to quickly review the topic that we covered last week. So we were talking about motivational interviewing, and really sort of that topic area included the basics of motivational interviewing, the models of change, when and how you can use motivational interviewing, and also how these strategies can be applied to your work with job seekers in person as well as through telehealth delivery, because obviously at the moment we're doing a lot of external servicing right now, and it can be a little bit more challenging to have those conversations over the phone or video. For today, we'll be talking a bit about, or I will be talking about wellbeing considerations for your clients. What we'll be looking at more specifically is what is wellbeing. So if you joined me a couple of weeks ago, we talked about self-care and resilience for you working in the industry. We're kind of flipping that around and talking a bit more about how you can support that kind of wellbeing for your clients and job seekers today. We'll touch on wellbeing and work, and also look more specifically at psychological wellbeing and physical wellbeing, as well as some safety and wellbeing concerns. And then we'll jump into talking more about sort of practical things that you can do and ways to support your job seekers in improving their wellbeing, as well as supporting your job seeker and creating a routine. And we'll look at some just very basic resources that might be helpful as well towards the end of it. Just to get stuck into it, really, what is wellbeing? It's a state of balance in all areas of your life whilst navigating the ups and downs. So it's the experience of health, happiness, and prosperity. It includes having good mental health, life satisfaction, a sense of meaning and purpose, and ability to manage stress. So well-being isn't relying on someone being kind of physically, mentally healthy per se. We can see people with disabilities or with injuries that still have a very good sense of well-being. So it's sort of those other areas of our lives that are helping promote that resilience as well to manage any barriers that come our way. So overall health and well-being impacts enormously on our work lives, and also on the flip side, our work lives also impact on our health and well-being. Working as a whole improves health by giving individuals purpose, meaning, physical and mental activity, social networks, and routine. Just to kind of give you a very brief overview. Being unemployed can really mean that clients are more likely to suffer poor health and lack of general well-being. There's a lot of different reasons for that. I mean, part of it is obviously the financial disadvantage that people are in when they're unemployed. So that can lead to lack of access of things like, ability to go and see your GP or access psychological or physical supports, good food, your living situation, and so on. But to break it down a little bit further, I wanted to talk about unemployment and mental health. That's my area of specialty. So really both part-time and full-time employment improves an individual's overall mental health. We know that that's very well researched. Work is one of the absolute best things for mental health. So being unemployed might exacerbate several factors that can lead to a decline in overall mental health, and that includes social isolation, lack of purpose, and increased feelings of worthlessness. And of course, due to the current health environment, we're seeing that individuals are experiencing these factors to an even greater extent. And the impacts on this on mental health are sadly profound. So we're seeing that people that have suffered from mental health issues in the past, that is exacerbated. And we're also seeing that a lot of people that haven't dealt with poor mental health in the past are now experiencing that as a result of the increased instability and isolation that we're experiencing. So in terms of employment, just to give you a little bit of a background, and you know, there's probably a lot of you out there that have a great deal of experience with mental health, both personally and in your working lives, but there might be plenty of you as well that haven't come across a lot of this. So do bear with me. I just wanted to kind of run through why we talk about employment and mental health and the benefits, and also some ways that we can kind of look at for the signs of when that well-being of our mental or physical health declines. But some basic benefits of employment or mental health is that it provides a time structure, social contact, collective purpose, social identity, regular activity, and financial stability. I really wanted to highlight that first one as well. So that time structure and routine is something that can have a massive impact on our psychological well-being. So it has a tendency to exacerbate anxiety disorders, feelings of hopelessness and loneliness if we don't have that routine. And as we all know, work, you know, for better or worse at times, really kind of imposes that routine and structure on our lives. So making sure that we get up in the morning, that we have a place to go, we have a purpose, and so on. Also the social contacts, you know, more or less in certain industries, but overall we experience a lot of social contact through our jobs in one way or another, and not having that, so being socially isolated can exacerbate some of those psychological conditions and lead to an increase in anxiety when exposed. Sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. So it can lead to an increase in anxiety, but also on the flip side, wanting to sort of highlight that for people that have experienced social isolation because of COVID-19 or unemployment, actually re-entering society can cause a lot of anxiety and exacerbate mental health conditions as well. So it is a bit of a balance in that between the two. And we're probably going to be seeing that a fair bit now that mutual obligations are starting to come back on. People are starting to actually go back to work or be able to go back into the community, that some people might not cope too well with that. So there might be an increase in anxiety for certain individuals on the basis of that they've gotten so used to that isolation, and it's become a bit of a comfort for them. Also in terms of collective purpose, having goals, having a sense of achievement helps to decrease feelings of loneliness and has a good impact by increasing self-esteem and confidence. Social identity, I think anyone that has ever been out of, without a job can testament to this, that when we don't have a job, we kind of lose that sense of identity and a sense of a role in society. So by having employment, we can help to increase feelings of self-worth and self-esteem. Regular activity kind of speaks for itself. If we're out and about, we tend to be more active, we tend to be more resilient and less likely to suffer the adverse effect of poor mental health. And then financial stability, of course, if we have financial autonomy, that decreases overall stress levels and leads to an improvement in depression and anxiety. Just wanted to highlight as well, before we jump onto the next slide, that we'll talk a fair bit about the benefits of employment and the importance of employment in next week's webinar. So if that is something that you're interested in, definitely dial into that one. They'll go through that in a bit more detail. Again, if you joined me a couple of weeks ago, you might have seen this one already. So when we talk about the psychological well-being, it's important to also remember that feeling anxious or stressed is a normal part of life. We all feel this way from time to time, and a certain level of stress can be good for performance. However, when emotions become too intense, performance starts to decrease, individuals' well-being suffers. If you want to listen into the self-care one, definitely do reach out to us and we can send you that link to that one. But it's not black and white. We do need a certain level of stress, but it's balancing those two, having not too much and not too little of it. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how to recognize mental health decline in your job seekers, because again, you might be very used to talking about this and seeing this in your job seekers, and for others this might be a fairly new thing, and you might be seeing a bit more of this for the first time, and it depends on what kind of cohort we work with as well. Just a little bit of a disclaimer that these points that I've got listed here, they don't necessarily mean that the person is suffering from anxiety or depression, but these are some common things that we see in people that do suffer from poor mental health or poor mental well-being. It's particularly important if you see a change in someone's behavior. So if they've gone from not doing one of these things to showing some of these signs, that could be a bit of a red flag, and a good opportunity to have a chat to them about what might be going on for them. But some of the things that we might see in people that are suffering from poor mental health is talking in a way that is difficult to understand because the thoughts just don't seem to follow each other, or the content of their speech doesn't make sense. We might also see people dressing inappropriately. So for example, wearing a lot of clothes on a very warm day. This can differ, of course, but if it's 30 degrees outside and someone's coming in a jumper and a jacket, that might be a little bit of a cause for concern that something is just not quite adding up. Loss of interest in work, study, and hobbies that were previously enjoyed, or very little interest in engaging in any activities. So particularly we see this with people that might have been really well engaged. They might have been coming into appointments, they might have been engaging in their studies, and all of a sudden they tend to drop off, or they start to have excuses why they can't keep up with it. That's often a sign that something is happening in the background. Making constant comments about feeling sad, lonely, worried, or stressed. Really, if someone is bringing that up and taking any opportunity to kind of comment on that, that's a pretty big red flag, and something that we do want to take seriously, because people tend to obviously kind of find a way to bring that up in conversation without necessarily even disclosing the full thing, because it's something that is constantly on their mind. Appearing to be tired or fatigued, or reporting difficulty sleeping or difficulty getting out of bed. So if there's any changes there, they might be sleeping in, missing appointments, they're coming in very tired, or commenting on that. Increased irritability or appearing tense and on edge. This is a bit of an interesting one because, of course, we're going to see people that are a little bit agitated from time to time. It can be frustrating navigating the systems. But if we're seeing someone that generally has a pretty happy, good sense of communication, and they're on edge or irritable, that can be a good sign that something is going on there. And it's just things to look out for and be mindful of. Presenting with a lack of confidence or appearing very shy. Reporting physical symptoms, including pain, gastrointestinal symptoms, and headaches, for which no medical cause has been found. Sometimes, of course, there might still be medical or physical cause for this, but we also see people that are experiencing headaches, upset stomach, and so on, if they're dealing with mental health concerns. Looking unkempt, so especially if they have changed from previously. So if someone usually comes in very, nice and neat and well dressed, and all of a sudden they show up and haven't washed their hair for a while, and they're wearing clothes that haven't been washed, and that could be a good indication that might be a conversation you want to have with them around what's going on. And arriving late or missing appointments without any real reason for it. So just some little things to look out for that might be a flag that there are things going on for the person in the background, and we'll come back to that in a little bit and talk about how we might have some of those conversations and what we can do in that case. Also on the other side, there's some typical signs that we see with people and with job seekers that are struggling with the physical health. So with mental health, there is a bit of a stigma, so a lot of the time people don't necessarily bring it up. So that's why we talk about kind of seeing those signs. But it's quite similar with physical health, and I think a lot of the time we don't necessarily expect this. We think that if someone's dealing with a physical condition, they tend to talk about it, but that's not always the case. There's still a bit of shame and uncertainty around certain conditions, so it's still a good one to look out for. So a couple of the signs that we might see is that a job seeker might complain about pain or difficulty getting around. So it can be difficulty getting up the stairs, in and out of the car, in and out of bed. You might also notice a change in the physical appearance, including the level of self-care. Someone is dealing with acute or chronic pain. We often see that they don't have the energy or capacity to maybe engage in self-care practices as much as they would normally. So things like showering might be difficult, dressing themselves and so on. So a change in their appearance can be a good thing to kind of look out for. Being very resistant to look for certain employment opportunities that require a specific level of physical capacity is a common red flag. Sometimes we'll have people that just aren't interested in a certain role, but if they are very hesitant or concerned or anxious about a certain role, especially if it's involving a lot of lifting or bending or being on your feet for long periods, it's could be a good opportunity to talk about, you know, the physical capacity and what might be going on there. And also if the job seeker finds it difficult to sit down for long periods, so it's not just about kind of being physically active, it can be sitting down and having to get up and move around a bit. It can often be people with chronic back pain, they can't sit for certain periods, or they might start to lose sensation in their legs, so they might be very restless in their appearance. So that's another good one to look out for. I also really wanted to highlight the safety and well-being aspects, particularly right now when we're seeing such a change in terms of sort of the economic, vocational, interpersonal changes of social distancing or physical distancing. It does have an impact, and I think most people have probably heard, you know, on the news and through different ways that there's been an increase in domestic violence hotline calls. We are seeing, very sadly, an increase in violence in the home. So it's another aspect which is important to look out for, because we do see a lot of clients that, you know, for various reasons, they might be at risk of that. And at times that can be a life or death situation. So knowing what to look out for and knowing kind of how to bring that subject up can be really important. So really we're seeing that many people are spending more time in small family units, and that tends to cause interpersonal pressures and conflict. Financial stress might be increasing instability in that accommodation as well, so we might see an increase in homelessness. And job loss due to the situation will also obviously increase financial strain on families. So some of the signs of family violence or some of the activities of family violence in the home is things like one party or several parties withholding necessary items such as food or medicine, hand sanitizer, misinforming the victim about the pandemic to induce fear. So both of these link together to try and contain them, probably within the household, and trying to isolate them from the people around them. Threaten to prevent the victim and or the children from seeking medical help. We also see sort of feelings of being more justified in wanting to escalate their actions. So increasing controlling behaviors. And also on the flip side, when we talk to people about violence in the home, we might see that people experiencing abuse might dismiss or downplay what's going on, especially during a pandemic, and saying that they're just stressed, there's just a lot of pressure on them at the time. The safety and well-being aspect is a tricky one, because it's probably, I mean, it can be very difficult to talk to job seekers about the mental and physical well-being, but the safety aspect is probably even more difficult. It can also be very frustrating on the basis of the fact that a lot of victims might not want to talk about it, or they might deny it, or they might not be ready to access help. So the absolute best thing that you can do in that situation is be that person that they can talk to, and a safe person in that space, and also having some information ready to go. And we'll talk to that a little bit later in terms of some resources that might be handy to have with you, that might help someone if they're in a situation where they're having to get out of there, that they can access support so they feel safe to actually get out of the situation. But I really just wanted to highlight that one because it might be something that you will see more in your job seekers, that they might be coming in with, they might be kind of low in terms of the mood, or they might be showing up with bruises, or they might actually, again, sort of that in terms of the clothing aspect, they might be wearing long sleeves on a hot day because they're trying to cover up. So there's little bits and pieces to be mindful of there, but it might not be something that you can directly influence, but it's something to be mindful of. So we'll jump into kind of ways to support your job seekers in improving and maintaining their well-being. So we'll go through a few different areas of that. We talked to this point a fair bit in terms of the motivational interviewing and how to do assessments to find out kind of the information you need with your job seekers. So if you want to get a little bit more information about this in depth, you can definitely reach out and we can send you the video links for those topics. So I won't spend too much time on this, but I did want to touch on this because it is important, because it's often a very difficult subject to broach in terms of talking about the well-being with your job seekers. So a few little tips there is to ask open-ended questions to promote a conversation around what's going on for the job seeker. If we ask close questions, then there's an opportunity for them to not really open up. They can just say yes, no, and move on. So by asking open-ended questions, we give them a chance to actually bring that subject up themselves. Try and be patient. Job seekers experiencing poor well-being might take longer to engage and to develop a relationship with than other job seekers. So, you might see some of these signs the first time or the initial appointment, but it might take quite a few appointments before you're starting to see them opening up. So just being mindful of that and being patient that it might not be a quick fix. Understanding that the stress and pain that the job seeker is experiencing is real. I'll put that one in there because I think in our industry as well, it's easy to kind of get stuck in the mindset that people have excuses, which, at times they do. They have I've heard some pretty poor excuses, but if they're talking about, poor well-being and pain, we'd rather take it seriously in case there is something there than to kind of not take it seriously and then having to regret that later. So if we can have those conversations with an open mind and actually listen and want to hear what they're saying, it's going to make the conversation a lot easier. Using positive language and helping the job seeker to identify their strength. Also focusing on the job seeker's abilities to do activities. So what they can do rather than what they can't do. So often the job seekers themselves will be very stuck in that mindset of what they can't do. So the best thing we can do is to kind of help shift that conversation to, okay, well, we know what you can't do. Let's look at what you can do. Because there's plenty of things that people can do, even if they're experiencing some well-being issues. And then communicate clearly and concisely, ensuring that the job seeker understands you by asking them to kind of repeat things back to you and checking in along the way in that conversation. Some other very basic actions, I guess, to be mindful of when you're having these conversations with the job seekers are what we can do in that space. So I've just put a few questions on here that is good. They're good to ask yourself along the way. First one being, would the job seeker benefit from an ESAT to review the capacity and need for further support? If we get a stream A job seeker in and they're disclosing that there's a lot of mental health concerns or physical health or safety concerns, housing, then they're probably not going to be a true stream A, and we might need to look at supporting them into stream C, or they might be better off with the desk consultant or so on. So that's a good first point of call, that we need some further support there. The other question, and something that you can obviously have a conversation directly with the job seeker about, is are they engaged in any internal or external support? So things like GPs, psychological services, OT services, NDIS, housing supports and so on. And if not, then would they benefit from being linked in with these supports? And finally, are there any internal or external services that you can suggest to the job seeker and, you know, consider, do you have the capacity yourself to help them access these supports? So again, we'll come back to that towards the end about some resources, but it's a really good thing to take stock of. Okay, well, what do we have internally that might help with addressing some of the wellbeing concerns, and what are some of the external kind of bulk billing or government supports in place that we could refer someone to kind of get them back on track. And then I just wanted to really kind of touch on what we can do here and now when we're sitting down. It might still be external for a lot of you in terms of sort of phone appointments, but when they're actually engaging with you in the employment services, one of the biggest things is setting up regular appointments, preferably the same day or time on a consistent basis. This will help the job seeker to manage their expectations of the services and also implement a structure around their contacts. Also assisting the client in setting short as well as long-term goals, setting clear expectations on what you expect from them, but also what they can expect from you. And I know, you know, a lot of you will probably have quite an extensive initial appointment with them when you go through the job plans and talk about the expectations. I would highly suggest kind of having that as a bit of a agenda point for your follow-up contacts with them, at least for the first few weeks, because it's a lot of information to go through in those job plans. So it's a really good idea to kind of check in on those expectations along the way. And you'll see that they're more likely to actually engage well if they know what's expected of them and also what they can expect from you. This one's the big one. I know it's not always easy, but try and not leave them waiting past their appointment time whenever possible. Sometimes it can't be helped. Sometimes you, with another job seeker or in the meeting that runs long and then you just can't get out of. But in terms of someone that is already struggling with their well-being, having them wait for appointments can exacerbate some of that stress and anxiety. So keeping that structure for them as much as possible in terms of seeing them at their appointment time is a really helpful thing. And then keeping resources handy for internal and external services that they can access if needed. I know I keep going on about that one and we'll talk about that a little bit, but I think it's such an important one because I know that all of you guys are incredibly busy and you're not necessarily, you know, all of these services. You're not a health professional, you're not the trainer, you're not, you know, you're there to do your job, but if you can outsource and refer them on to internal and external services, that will not only help their well-being, but it will make your job a lot easier as well. So before we get into resources, I just wanted to really highlight the benefit of structure and routine on well-being as well. So one of the single best strategies to manage well-being, whether it's physical or mental health or stress in general, is in uncertain times, is to implement and maintain a sense of structure and routine. So maintaining or creating a routine helps to keep the mind occupied. It makes us feel more in control and helps reduce our stress levels. And this is something that you can support your job seekers with, to develop a routine, even in times when the normal routine is not available to them. So if they lost a job or they're in isolation, you can still create a sense of routine and structure without having those things. It's a bit more work, but the benefits of it is just amazing. So just some tips on how to kind of support your job seeker in developing that routine. And of course, you know, it's going to come back on them. It's not something that you can implement and enforce, but if you are there and you're having those conversations with them, that can help kind of encourage them to stick to a routine or set up a routine for themselves. So one thing that you can do is helping the job seeker to set SMART goals. So when I say SMART goals, I think most of us have probably heard that one before, but it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. Really, why we set SMART goals is so that we can set goals that are, you know, realistic and we can achieve. Because if we're setting goals that are too high, then we're less likely to achieve them, and that's going to impact on our confidence and our momentum and motivation. If we set goals that are too easy, they might not do a whole lot for us too. So it's a lot around that goal setting, setting the right type of goals. So it might be, you know, setting goals around getting their job searching upskilling happening. So it might be, you know, a resume, or it might be interview practice, or it might be a course or training that they can engage in. But helping them set those goals, and also encouraging them to schedule time into their week to take steps to achieve these goals, to kind of break it down into those steps, which also kind of helps fill out the week for them. Encouraging the job seekers to wake up and go to bed at the same time each day, regardless of whether they have activities planned or not. I think this is something that I see a lot in my clients. As soon as they are out of work, their routine kind of falls apart very quickly. So someone that is used to getting up early in the morning and going to bed at a decent time might now start to sleep in the morning, go to bed late, and kind of turning their whole day around. And that's difficult to kind of manage for a few reasons. It's going to impact on our well-being, because we're probably not going to get some good quality sleep that way. It's going to be unpredictable sleep, and our bodies don't tend to like that. But also, when we actually do get into work or study, if we're having a routine that's completely out of whack, then it's going to be really hard to kind of get back into that. And I think this is a really important one right now, because a lot of people might not be working, or they might not have been doing so much job searching. And once things start to open up again, there might be more opportunities. And if they're not ready for it, and sort of their routine's a little bit out of whack, then that's when we start to see people falling out of work, because they're just not prepared. You know, they might not be ready to get up in the morning. They might not be that motivated because of all of those things going on. So helping them to kind of understand the benefits of that can be really helpful. Again, forward planning and booking your appointments with the job seekers on the same day and time consistently. Not only for their benefit, I mean, it's incredibly good for their well-being in terms of creating that structure, routine, and expectation, but also you're setting that expectation on them, so that you know when they're coming in, and you know that they know that every Monday, you know, fortnightly, you're seeing Adam, and you know what you're doing each time. So it's creating that expectation both ways. So it helps to actually promote them attending their appointments. They're more likely to attend appointments if they're set on the same day or time than if they are chopping and changing a lot. Encouraging the job seekers to attend the site for their job searching, coursework, etc. So I know a lot of you have great sites with a lot of resources. You might have computers, you might have rooms where they can sit and do some sort of quiet study if needed. Really encourage them to use it. Of course, it's a bit tricky right now. It's going to be more relevant once the restrictions ease a bit further, but encourage them to actually come into site. Is going to help to keep that motivation and momentum going, because it's easy to find excuses not to do something when you're at home by yourself. But creating almost like an employment structure by, you know, every day, this is what that person is doing, and they're doing it from the site where there's some level of accountability on them. Also encouraging the job seekers to actually use a calendar or a printed schedule, and writing down some of the tasks that you might have talked to them about, as well as actually sort of scheduling in rewarding and fun activities in their calendar every week. So activity planning is something that I tend to do a lot with my clients, because it is so helpful to actually break it down and look at when can we fit this in to, one, get it done, but also keep that routine and keep that sense of achievement going. So having a hard copy or even a phone calendar that they use is really great for creating that routine and structure. So finally, I just wanted to talk to you about some resources. So I've put down some very general resources, because it's of course going to differ depending on if you're in a regional area or metro area or rurally. But generally, everywhere should have some level of resources of this caliber. And I would highly recommend that if you don't already know of the resources in your area, to kind of do a little bit of homework yourself to work out what's available, because it's just so helpful to have that if someone is coming in and they're needing some assistance to promote their well-being. So first thing being contact details for internal services on offer. So it might be internal psychological services or physical services, OTs, so on. It might be training opportunities for courses. Plenty of you have those little job hubs where you kind of set up a couple of times a week. So having the resources available in terms of who to kind of refer the person to and the contact details or little flyers or anything that might help them engage. Also details for local bulk billing GP in your area. A lot of people don't have a regular GP that they see. And if they don't, then just knowing where to kind of go with it can be incredibly helpful to get over that barrier of between needing to access help and not accessing help because they just don't know where to go with it. Details for the local Services Australia social worker. So basically everywhere, it might not be in person, but all offices should have a social worker available in the Centrelink. A lot of them do have them on site so that people can actually go in and sit down with them in person, but if not, they can access them over the phone. But it's highly beneficial to have a bit of a relationship with your local office in regards to that and know who the contact person is if needing some quick assistance with things like housing or emergency supports. Also details for local bulk billing or government psychological services. So that might be for young people, it might be Headspace, might be your alcohol and drug services, adult and child mental health, acute care teams if someone is needing to access services very, very acutely. So just having some details there. It might be a bulk billing psychologist that you're aware of in your community that take on people. Also details for your local community centres. So often community centres offer things like food, clothing, facilities for showering, doing the washing, so on. And details for local housing organisations, so shelters, Department of Housing and RAS. I really want to highlight that the last two as well, when we talked about that safety aspect, these are great resources to have on hand, because if someone is in a situation where there's family violence and they decide that they need to get out of there, they tend to leave with, you know, nothing but the clothes on their back or a little bag if at the very best. So often they need those type of services for clothing or for furniture and housing. So if you have that handy and can refer them on, that can be incredibly helpful. So that's pretty much it for the topic for today. So basically we covered the basics of well-being, how you can recognize the decline in well-being in your job seekers, and we covered off how to support your job seekers in improving their well-being. So what well-being is, how to recognize it, how to address it, and also supporting your job seekers to develop and maintain the routine and some very basic resources to keep handy. And if you know of other resources as well in your community, definitely, you know, keep them handy as well. There's some really good specific ones, but they tend to be very different in different areas of Australia. So I do encourage you to have a bit of a look at that. But yeah, that's basically it from me. Any questions that have come up from any of this? Let's see if I can open up the little bubble. Okay. I'll take it as no questions. It's a good thing that we've covered it all for today. If you are interested in having the recordings of any of the topics, including today's one, please do reach out. We're more than happy to send them through. If there's anything that is of interest or you want to just go back and view again, or a topic that you missed. On that note as well, I just wanted to highlight that next week is on the importance of work right now. So like I mentioned before, so I hope you join us for that one. We will cover off the importance of work for individuals, the importance of work in society in general, the cycle of unemployment, target group vulnerabilities, addressing vulnerabilities, what post-placement support is and the importance of it, risk profiling and supporting those in PPS. I'm sure you know you're more than aware of this, but at the moment any placements that are there is just so crucial to hold on to. So I think we'll see that PPS is probably the big ticket item at the moment to hold on to people that actually are in work, because it's a very valuable thing right now. But yeah, that's basically it for me. So thank you very much for joining me today and listening, and I hope you all have a lovely afternoon and week. Thank you so much.